When you think about worm, most people would probably think of earthworm. However, I'm pretty sure most of you are already aware that there are many kinds of worms. Tapeworm is another example which people might be familiar with. Another famous example would be leech, even though some people might not be aware that leeches are in fact worms. Meanwhile, some worms are actually not a worm. For example, the tongue worm. Oh, by the way, if it's not obvious enough, yes, this is a human eye. Questions might be popping up in your head right now. So, let me bring up the question. What exactly is tongue worm? Tongue worms are scientifically named Pentastomida, which means 5 mouths. I'll talk about that later in the morphology section. Their taxonomy is actually quite complicated. Some place them as their own phylum, which is of course phylum Pentastomida. Some assign them to class level, while some assign them to subclass level. At first glance, they look like worms, which is why some of them were classified in several worm taxa before. Later on, we found out that they have similar cuticle to arthropods. Some speculated they are the transition between worms and arthropods, hence, they deserve to be classified in their own phylum. However, some thought they should still be classified within the Arthropoda phylum. In 1972, a spermatology comparison was made between the Raillietiella hemidactyli, which is a pentastomid, aka tongueworm, and Argulus foliaceus, which is the common fish louse. Fish lice is a crustacean, by the way, and they found similarities between the two sperms. Some phylogenetic analysis also support this finding, which is why tongueworms were classified together with the fish louse in the Ichthyosraka class. Well, using past tense in that sentence might not entirely be correct, because some people still do classify them together. However, morphological analysis which included fossil records were published later, and these showed the possibility that they are indeed stem arthropods, not belonging to the true arthropod phylum. Hence they get their own phylum like I said earlier. As far as I know, that's the extent of their taxonomic analysis, which means there's still no generally accepted consensus yet, so we can leave it at that. You could just choose whichever sounds more likely to you, but do keep in mind that various classifications exist. Anyway, if you are wondering why they are called tongueworm, that's because some of them, the most famous genus, Linguatula, somewhat resembles a tongue. Debatable, I know, but that's the etymology at least. Literally means little tongue. Linguatula serrata is considered to have a worldwide distribution, so if we're talking about tongueworm in general, you could argue that they can be found around the world. Still, if you look at them at a species level, most of them have a limited distribution, of course. Next, let's talk about their morphology. Tongueworms generally have two types of body morph. Some are flat, like the Linguatula, while some are cylindrical, like the Porocephalus. The more commonly known armillifera have ring-like structures along their body. The diagnostic character which might not be apparent is, they have 5 protuberances on their head. 1 is their mouth, and 4 are hooks. These 5 protuberances are why they are called pentastomida, which means 5 mouths, like I said earlier. In some groups, like those in the genus Cephalobaena, for example, these 5 protuberances are very noticeable because, well, they protrude significantly. Anyway, aside from those 5 organs, they basically have no orifice on their body. Oh, by the way, they are quite small, only around 1 to 10 centimeters, maybe a little bit more for those that live inside pythons. I haven't explicitly talked about it, but yes, if it's not obvious enough, they are indeed parasites. That's why they don't really need that much to survive. Just a strong enough cuticle to protect them from their host's immune system, some hooks to cling, and a mouth to absorb food. So, let's talk about their lifestyle. But before that, tongueworms are endoparasites that mostly live in the upper respiratory tract of their hosts. I did talk about this earlier, but I would like to emphasize once again that they are not called tongueworm because they infect tongues. They are called tongueworm because Linguatula looks like tongue. But anyway, Intuitively, different groups parasitize different hosts. For example, those with cylindrical body usually parasitize snakes, while those with flat body usually parasitize carnivorans, especially dogs. Some also parasitize other reptiles, amphibians, or even birds. That's their definitive host, though, meaning the host in which their adult form resides. Before entering their definitive host, they go through intermediate hosts first. So, in general, their life cycle is like this. Adults will lay eggs inside the definitive host's respiratory system. Those eggs will exit the host either through the respiratory tract, like when the host cough for example, or through their digestive system, aka exit through the anus. Eggs could get stuck in grasses for example, or perhaps enter the rivers and get stuck somewhere. Then, the intermediate host will accidentally swallow the egg. Inside the intermediate host, the egg will hatch and larvae will grow. These larvae will pierce through the intestine, crawl to some meaty organs, and then just wait there. When the intermediate host get eaten by a predator, that's when the next development will trigger. If that predator is their definitive host, they will develop into their adult form, move to the host's respiratory tract, hook themselves to the wall, and basically just, again, chill there. Tongueworms reproduce sexually, so technically, if only one individual resides in your body, then they couldn't reproduce, but that's usually not the case. After quite a while, they will lay eggs, and the cycle continues. I might have spoiled you already, perhaps in some images I will use during editing, or perhaps even in the thumbnail, but yes, they could also infect humans. But how could that be if human is not even their definitive host? Well, let's talk about it. The case where a tongueworm infects human is called Pentastomiasis. That's the general case at least. If doctors are able to identify and diagnose the parasite with more detail, specific genus will have specific name. For example, linguatulosis for linguatula infection, and porocephalosis for porocephalus and armillifera. To put it simply, linguatulosis for the flatworms and porocephalosis for the cylindrical worms. Okay, but where exactly do humans fall in their life cycle? It's right here. Human can be their intermediate host. For linguatulosis, it could happen when a dog licks your face, or simply wheeze, cough, or perhaps sneeze onto you. Or, this could happen if you consume a definitive host. Some people do eat dogs and snakes after all. You could also just be very unlucky and simply caught some stray eggs in the water or perhaps grasses. You could touch the egg, then it accidentally enters your body when you wipe your mouth, eat using your hand, or something like that. Because human is not their definitive host, they don't reproduce inside human. So that's a slight positive, I guess. Most pentastomiasis in human are asymptomatic, meaning you could have some tongueworms in your body and you wouldn't even notice that. However, it really depends on where do the larvae resides and how severe the infection is. For example, multiple eggs could be swallowed, and a lot of larvae can reside inside your body. There are two major types of pentastomiasis in human, visceral and ocular. Visceral pentastomiasis is when the larvae resides in the visceral region, such as around the peritoneal tissues of intestinal wall, liver, spleen, etc. In rare cases, ocular pentastomiasis could occur. That's when the larva resides in the eye. If it's not diagnosed and treated early, you could lose your sight. And yes, if it's not obvious enough, what you're looking at right now is a larva of armillifera inside a human's eye. And here is the extracted creature. There are actually some good pentastomid fossils. What you're looking at right now is a pentastomid fossil latching on an ostracot. The worm is the orange one right here. Here is a more detailed view on it. This one dates back to Silurian period. To be precise, around 425 million years ago. There are even fossils of pentastomids dating back to the Cambrian. Unlike the present pentastomids, these fossils have limbs, which is quite interesting and might indicate the fact that they are not yet obligate parasites. Perhaps they were transitioning to a parasitic life. But yeah, that's pentastomids, aka tongue worms. If you find them creepy or scary, then hey, pay attention to your hygiene. That could prevent pentastomid infection. If you find them cool, then hey, good for you. Hope more things will be discovered. But for now, let's just learn what is known. And that's all for now. Oh, by the way, because Linguatula infects dogs, wherever you are, you still have the risk of getting infected by pentastomids, so don't think you are safe. Anyway, enjoy your day.